Welcome to School Britannia, the podcast where two Aussies teach Brits their own history. This is my friend Ellie.
And this is my friend Claire.
Welcome back, Ellie.
Thank you, Claire. I'm so excited to be
It's
here.
so nice to have you.
And we're in France.
We are. I am still in France. This is kind of an extended working holiday, so I've been doing lots of stuff while I'm here.
Do you have a working holiday visa for this?
No, don't tell anyone. Look, by the time this goes out, I'll have left the country. It's fine. But I've had a really nice time here with lots of lovely friends who you've all heard about because they've been on the podcast. Almost literally all of them.
Pretty much.
Yes. But I've missed having you to talk to about history stuff.
I've missed being here. I've been in manic work mode
Poor thing.
in Edinburgh, working at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe,
Yes.
which is a very, very full-on experience.
All theatre all the time.
So much theatre, which I love, but holy moly, I'm glad to be in the south of France, wandering along canals and eating baguettes and wearing a giant hat.
Yes. It's very, it's a nice change of pace, and I think you've earned it.
Thank you. Although yesterday I did fall off my bike in a fairly spectacular fashion, so now I have a big graze on my elbow and my knee like a 9-year-old child.
Oh, little poppet.
It's very sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you were very brave and you got right back up again. So, Ellie, have you got a good podcast you've been listening to during this manic fringe business?
Oh my God. I mean, to be honest with you, I haven't been listening to many podcasts, and that tells you how manic it is because I listen to podcasts all the time and I've been too busy.
You didn't have a free ear.
No, too busy to listen to podcasts because I used to listen at work,
healthy.
which I really couldn't do during August. But
It was a lot about your old job.
Totally. But just before I went into the Fringe, which is what it feels like going into a black hole, just before I went to the black hole of the Fringe, I was listening to this amazing podcast called West Cork.
West Cork.
It's only available on Audible, so it's a bit of a terrible thing to bring up because
only for
people
people
can't.
have money.
I know, it's so annoying, but it's the best. It's so good. I listened to it on my Audible free. I had a free trial and I just consumed it. It was so wonderful. It's the story. I don't know if you've heard it. It's a true crime podcast and it's the story of Sophie Toscan de Plantier, who was murdered in West Cork in School, I think it's called. School in West Cork.
Oh, wow.
And it was in 1996, so a while ago now. And nobody knows who did it. It's still a mystery. She was just on holiday in her holiday house, and in the morning her neighbours found her outside dead. And it was really, it rocked the community. It was incredibly upsetting. And they think it was this guy, her neighbour, but no one can really prove it. And it's fascinating. It's really good storytelling by this investigative journalist, Sam Bungie, and documentarian Jennifer Ford, who also happen to be partners and have a baby, and it's kind of adorable. It's really, really good audio podcasty business. Have you been listening to any podcasts that you love?
Yeah, always.
Constantly.
Working holidays leave plenty of time to listen to podcasts. I've been binging this one called The Industrial Revolutions. Plural. Turns out there are, I think, 3 industrial revolutions.
Whoa.
Yeah, you really shouldn't listen to podcasts when you're falling asleep because you miss crucial bits of them. But it's just a really fascinating look at the way the Industrial Revolution started. It goes way back into history of, the philosophical concepts that led to them, as well as the inventions and all the key players, and looks at it, across the world, and it's been fascinating. Yeah, it was so cool. Yeah, I really enjoy it. It's still going. It's by this American guy, and it's just... I don't normally listen to podcasts by single presenters, but I'm impressed by this one.
Awesome. That sounds great.
So, Ellie, I may have an inkling of this, but what will you be teaching us about today?
Well, Claire, like I said, for the last month, I've been working at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe.
Woo! Do you say fringe and I just think, bangs.
Yeah, totally. Do you know much about the Fringe apart from bangs? Or
I do.
Yes.
I know
You've
certain aspects of the Fringe. I have been in a Fringe show.
Claire has been a performer in the Edinburgh Festival Fringe.
Yeah, we use that term loosely. I was
You were
on
very
stage.
good. She was excellent with
Thank
the
you.
brilliant Anya Anastasia
Yes.
in her show.
Taught Emot Songs of Cake and Death. I
Songs of
played
Cake and
handmaiden to Marie Antoinette, which was very fun. I said nothing. It was
all face,
yeah.
but excellent face.
Thank you.
Thank
you. So I know what it's like to be in the Fringe. I know it's manic.
Yes.
I know it is the outer bits of a larger festival.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Hence
Very
the
good.
name Fringe.
Yeah, correct.
And it's in Edinburgh. That's all my knowledge.
That's very good. That's a lot more than I think a lot of people know.
I won't lie, I only really know it's of the Fringe of a bigger festival because you told me.
Oh, I've already...
Well, at the time, I was just like, it's the festival, and you're like, no, it's the Fringe of the bigger festival. I was like, oh.
I'm so sorry. I got on my high horse.
Well, no, I mean, it's great to know those things. I had no idea.
It's interesting. It's interesting because of its history, Claire.
Yes, this is always the way.
The Fringe is massive. It's really intense. This year, there are around 3,800 shows, I know, in 335 venues. I saw about 32, which...
That's impressive.
I think is pretty good going,
Well, you're
considering
working,
I was working full-time.
more
6
than
days a
full-time.
week, the whole time. So 856,541 Fringe tickets were sold.
Whoa!
I know. Artists, arts industry professionals, media and audiences came from around 150 countries around the world. And, just a tidbit, there were 1,000 street performers.
Oh,
which wouldn't surprise anyone. Not that I don't like street performers, they're amazing. It's
But
just
when you
very
live
crowded.
in a city and you're trying to walk to work,
It can be a bit frustrating.
it's a lot.
And that's just the Fringe. Like you said, there is another festival, but would you like to guess how many festivals are in Edinburgh in August, Claire?
In August.
Yeah.
I know of at least 3.
Well, there are more than 3. Isn't that
5.
mad? There's 5.
7.
5.
Oh, there's 5. There's
Yeah.
5. Oh. I thought this kept going. I'm sorry.
It was like a bidding war.
Yeah.
3, 5, 7, 10. So in August, there is the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, which runs from the 2nd to the 26th of August. The Edinburgh International Festival, where I worked in 2016, which runs from the 2nd to the 26th of August. And they're the sort of two, well, from my point of view, they're the kind of two main ones, because as you said, the Fringe is the fringe of the Edinburgh International Festival.
I feel like they're the two that take up the most physical space in the city and cause me the
Totally.
most problems.
Well, they're the performing festivals,
Yeah.
I suppose, because the other ones are the Edinburgh Art Festival, which mostly happens in galleries,
Yes.
but they do have other stuff as well.
But in like
happening.
established spaces that always have art in them year round anyway.
Usually, or street art, but street art doesn't yell at you.
Street art doesn't litter flyers everywhere.
Exactly. Oh. There's also, so that's the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, the Edinburgh International Festival, the Edinburgh Art Festival, the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo,
Ah, yes.
and the International Book Festival.
Oh, cool.
So that's 5 just in August, which is massive.
Cool.
Cool.
There's only 2 of those that I got right.
I mean, there's so many, but then that's just August, because there's also the Edinburgh International Film Festival, the International Storing Festival, Hogmanay, which is New Year's Eve in Scotland, the Edinburgh Science Festival, the Edinburgh International Children's Festival, and the Edinburgh Jazz and Blues Festival. And they're at different times of the year.
Yeah, the Jazz and Blues Festival is like the very end of July,
That's
so
right.
I was thinking of that one.
Yeah, and the Science Festival is usually in spring, and the Storytelling Festival, I think, is in October, and then Hogmanay is New Year's Eve. So they're sort of spread around, but Edinburgh has so many festivals, and
Yeah.
they're just the, like, official ones. So they're the ones under the Festivals Edinburgh umbrella. But there's also, like, I know there's a food festival, there's a TV festival. Have you heard of any more? There's heaps.
I imagine so. I bet there'll be a gin festival and a whiskey festival.
Gotta be.
There was a sushi festival once.
There we go. Edinburgh has a festival for literally everything. But why, Claire?
Why?
Why? How did this begin? Well, it all starts with the Second World War.
Oh, that old chestnut.
So in 1947, Europe was pretty fucked. Just
a little grim.
We just had the Second World War. Hundreds of thousands of people had been displaced, including your grandparents and my grandparents, who went to Australia.
And how the fates brought us together.
6 million people had been killed in the Holocaust, and 70 million people had been killed overall. So
Jesus.
Everyone was shaken.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very, very upset. So this guy called Rudolf Bing, an Austrian impresario, which means like a producer or theatre manager, he'd fled Nazi Germany to Britain, and he decided that we all needed something to restore our sense of shared humanity.
Yeah.
Fair enough, Rudolf.
Yeah.
That something was art.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent choice.
So Rudolf started looking around the UK for a suitable place to put on a big old arts festival, somewhere where people from all over Europe and all across the world could get together and do something positive instead of killing each other all the time.
Good call.
Yeah, I thought so. London wasn't really an option because the Blitz.
Yes.
And like 2 million houses were destroyed in the Blitz, and 60% of those were in London. So London was real screwed. so destroyed. So he needed somewhere relatively compact that people could get to easily, walk around easily, somewhere that was unbombed, ideally.
A big task at that point.
Yep. And somewhere with lots of concert halls. And the solution, of course, was our beautiful Edinburgh.
Yay! A commendable choice.
It's a great choice.
If you'd asked me to choose a city that encompassed all those things, I'd be like, oh, Edinburgh's perfect.
Exactly.
Except now I'm like, no, stop doing this in Edinburgh. I want a quiet August, please.
Can we just have a quiet August?
Please, I just want to take a nap in the sunshine.
No, you can't.
You
Not
can
allowed.
if you go to France.
Yes. So the first Edinburgh International Festival began on the 24th of August 1947 with an aim to provide a platform for the flowering of the human spirit. Isn't that nice?
Mm.
One of the highlights of the first year's program was the reuniting of conductor Bruno Walter with the Vienna Philharmonic. So Bruno Walter had fled Nazi Germany as well, and he had been the conductor of the Vienna Philharmonic before the war. So it was really cool
so lovely.
that they could work together again in Edinburgh after the war and heal old wounds. Really nice, really symbolic and beautiful. So that was all lovely, but also in 1947, the Edinburgh International Festival had some uninvited guests.
Ooh.
Some people who wanted to come to the party but hadn't been issued a formal invitation. Very cheeky. These were Glasgow Unity Theatre, Christine Orr Players of Edinburgh, Edinburgh People's Theatre, Edinburgh District Community Drama Association, the Pilgrim Players, Edinburgh College of Art Theatre Group, and Manchester Marionette Theatre. So they popped up to Edinburgh to, well, a lot of them were just in Edinburgh.
I was going to say, I feel like they should have been invited. They were already there.
Totally. So they came along and they performed alongside the companies in the International Festival because why not? It's all about sharing art and doing art together. So why should they not get to come as well? That same year, a guy called John Grierson suggested establishing an Edinburgh International Film Festival. So the first film festival showed 75 films from 18 countries.
Wow.
So there's just all this stuff happening in Edinburgh all of a sudden in 1947.
I didn't realise it all started at the same time. Like, I didn't realise, that the fringe, the idea of the fringe kind of started from the very get-go.
It's mad, isn't it? It's really cool. 1947, a bumper year.
Mm.
In 1948, the fringe got its actual name. So before that, it had just been called, like, the extra bits.
The things not associated with the festival, but also happening in Edinburgh at the same time.
Exactly. Which is not that catchy.
No,
really.
it's a bit of a mouthful. The flyers would have been huge.
So a Scottish journalist called Robert Kemp remarked in 1948, "Round the fringe of the official festival drama, there seems to be more private enterprise than before. I am afraid some of us are not going to be at home during the evenings." So people just started calling it the fringe. It was really catchy.
Yeah, it is.
And that's come to mean pretty much like festival where people get together and do their own theatre all over the world. Because, of course, we have the Edinburgh Festival Fringe, but we have the Prague Fringe.
There's a Melbourne Fringe.
There's a Melbourne Fringe. And Adelaide Fringe is massive. There's a Perth Fringe. I think there's a Darwin Fringe.
Are they all on the fringes of a larger festival?
No. That's what's mad. It's become independent.
That's crazy.
So the Adelaide Fringe is. That's sort of adjoined to the Adelaide International Festival. But Melbourne Fringe is on in September, whereas the Melbourne Festival is on in October.
That's so interesting. It took on this life of its own.
Yeah, it's just become this thing that is, going all around the world. It's really cool. So, in 1950, we had the first Edinburgh military tattoo. Have you ever been to a tattoo?
No, it's expensive.
It's very expensive. I get a bit grumpy with it because they put up these massive
stadium
things around the castle.
It's up for 4 months of the year.
So annoying.
Even though the festival only runs for 1 month, it takes them 2 months to put up, it runs for a month, and it takes them a month to take down.
Yeah.
And it takes up the whole forecourt of the castle, which is
really pretty.
And you don't pay to enter that bit,
No.
so you can't go and enjoy all the views because the stadium's there, and it makes that part, the top half of the Royal Mile, chaos to navigate.
It really does.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's lovely. I've never been. My grandma loves watching it on TV, so I'm sure it has its...
Yeah.
If you have been to the tattoo and you loved it, please write in and let us know how much you loved it.
I find it interesting because I thought the tattoo was older than the festival. Because,
oh, really? Because it seems really old-fashioned.
Well, no, because they've been talking of splitting up the festivals so that they're not all in August, so that the city doesn't get so congested.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
But the tattoo will not budge, and they refuse to change their dates.
Oh, wow.
Even though people seem to specifically come for the tattoo and not the other festivals.
Really? Do they?
Yeah, and I thought their claim was that they are the oldest festival, therefore they should get priority, but
nope.
They're not.
They're 1950.
Yeah.
3 years after Fringe and Film and International Festival.
Yeah. That's so weird.
It's mad. Here is a list of cool things that have come out of the Fringe.
Oh, do tell.
It's just a highlights reel. So this thing called Beyond the Fringe, which I don't think you know about because I mentioned it before and you looked at me blankly.
Yep.
It was a late night review show written and performed by Peter Cook, Dudley Moore, Alan Bennett and Jonathan Miller, who, anyone from my parents' generation listening will be like, oh my God, it's an all-star lineup.
Oh,
They're
okay.
all so Alan Bennett, for example, super famous. He wrote The Madness of King George. Do you know that movie?
I want
It's
to
a
react
play.
positively, but I just don't know any of these things you're saying.
Do you know The History Boys?
Yes.
He wrote The History Boys.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank God someone turned that into a film in my lifetime.
And The Lady in the Van and heaps more. He's an incredible playwright. Peter Cook and Dudley Moore made Bedazzled, which you might know from the remake with Brendan Fraser and Elizabeth Hurley, where he wishes to become a basketball player, but then there's something wrong. And it's like the Faust myth, but reset in, the original one was reset in the swinging 60s in London.
Nice.
And with a very saucy lady devil. So that came out of Fringe. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which I was obsessed with when I was 16. It's this amazing play by Tom Stoppard, and it's these two minor characters from Hamlet.
Yes.
And you've seen it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I love it, I love it, I love it. And that premiered at the Fringe in 1966. And it said that there was 4 reviewers and 1 genuine audience member who had bought a ticket in the entire crowd. That was it. But by the next year, it was in London playing to massive crowds. And
That's insane.
Crazy. At the National Theatre, I think. So it got picked up real fast. It's amazing. Also, the careers of Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie and Emma Thompson kind of took off from the Fringe. So they won the first Edinburgh Comedy Award for their Cambridge Footlights show in 1981.
That's awesome.
Very cool. So that's just a few little tidbits.
Some good people in there.
Yeah. In 1979, we had the first Edinburgh International Jazz and Blues Festival. I'm sure it was great. I haven't really been to much jazz festival stuff.
It's awesome.
It
is really
cool.
good stuff.
Yeah.
It's incredible things. What did you international name?
Yeah.
Also just people you've never heard of who are incredible. I don't know, we went to something and we just danced and it was great.
Mm-hmm. In 1983, we had the first Edinburgh International Book Festival. Have you ever been to that?
No.
Me neither.
Which you would think I would.
I know, me too, but it's during August, so
Yeah.
it's so hard to fit it into my brain because I'm always working for one of the other festivals.
It gets lost a little bit, I think, for me in the rest of the festival stuff.
Yeah.
I remember before I left this year, they were setting up this big tent in a square in Edinburgh and I was like, oh, they've taken over this part of town for the festival as well now. This is ridiculous. And someone was like, oh, actually, that's the book festival. They do that every year.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, my bad.
I haven't actually ever seen anything there, but I've wandered around and it's so nice to come off these mad streets and you go into this beautiful, tranquil, lovely place filled with books and talking about writing.
Next year I should just go to the book festival.
Yeah, you should. It's gorgeous. In 1989, Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space, arrived to inaugurate the world's first science festival.
That's awesome!
The Edinburgh International Science Festival.
Science, ladies in science, going into space, smashing that glass ceiling.
Now, because this one's not in August, I've actually been to it and it's so cool. I went to this really, really extremely cool geology walk around Arthur's Seat. I loved it. I nerded out. Arthur's Seat is an extinct volcano, and they took us around and they showed us all of that, and they told us like the history of the Earth, which was mind-blowing and so cool. I loved it. Yeah, the Science Festival is brilliant. Also in 1989, we had the first Edinburgh Storytelling Festival, which is very, very lovely. Have you ever been to the Storytelling Centre?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I went to an event for the festival. It was really beautiful.
Yeah, it is really nice. I actually haven't been to the festival, but I saw a show at the Storytelling Centre, so a storytelling show during the festivals this year in August. It was called Blood and Gold, and it was about how Scotland's history of slavery still affects us today. And it was by this brilliant storyteller called Mara Menzies. She's fantastic. I loved it.
Nice.
In 1990, we had the first Scottish International Children's Festival because kids love theatre too. And it's an amazing space for experimental theatre for kids.
Oh, great.
There's lots of really, really interesting stuff happening in children's theatre.
Yeah, I've seen some great children's theatre stuff at the Fringe, and it's just incredible, and it's often just simple but effective, and it's really beautifully done.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because kids they're sort of a tough audience in some ways, because you really have to capture their attention and hold it.
Yes.
And that's
you will
hard.
know when they do not like what you're doing.
Totally. Yeah, so it's a really interesting one. So people in Scotland do Hogmanay anyway. We love it. It's fun.
Hogmanay being New Year's.
Hogmanay being New Year's. Thank you, Claire. Yes. And it's always great. But in 1992, we had the first official Hogmanay festival.
Oh, interesting.
I kind of have mixed feelings about it because last year it was very, very intense, and I saw people getting really messy. They sort of block out Princess Street for this big concert thing.
Yeah, I've heard mixed reviews from people of like, people like, it's great if you find like a good group of friends to go with and you just go and expect to have like a silly night. And I've heard other people say it's just really trashy and
so crowded.
Commercial and like really crowded.
It's pretty intense.
It doesn't sound like my scene.
No.
And I've never been.
Yeah. That's where I fall on Hogmanay. But again, if
they give you some great fireworks off the castle, which you don't have to pay to see.
Very true. This is very nice. And in 2004, the city's galleries, artists and museums came together to start the Edinburgh Art Festival.
Oh, cool.
So that is all the festivals.
So many.
So many.
There are always so many incredible things happening in our city. We're very lucky.
We are very lucky. So what's the haps with the festivals today, Claire?
Well, I don't know because I didn't go, Eleanor. You have to tell me.
Well, right now, they're going really strong. More people than ever attended shows this year.
I am not surprised.
Which, yes, anyone who was in Edinburgh this August would not be surprised to hear that. I, for one, saw some really brilliant stuff that changed the way I think about the world and how I interact with others.
That's awesome.
Everything from a true crime-esque physical theatre piece about schoolgirls getting possessed to a sold-out gig with the beautiful Sharon Van Etten in Leith Theatre, which was so dreamy and, just gorgeous. And then all the way to the brilliant Harry Clayton Wright of Briefs fame, coyly cutting up cucumbers in a wedding dress and showing us his homemade porn. So it's such an amazing place.
It sounds like you had a very Fringe experience.
I did. Well, a very Edinburgh Festivals experience.
Yes, yeah. Lots of different things.
Many different things. But both Fergus Linehan, the artistic director of the Edinburgh International Festival and my old boss, and Fringe Society Chief Executive Shona McCarthy have been very vocal about the fact that Brexit could have a disastrous effect on the festivals.
Oh, of course.
So like I said up the top, artists, producers, journalists and art industry professionals from around 150 countries came to Edinburgh for the festivals this year. That's massive.
Yeah.
And if people from countries in Europe had to apply for visas in the same way that Australian artists do, or people from African countries or people from any country, then the extra time and cost associated with applying for those visas could be crippling.
Yeah.
Not just for independent companies, but for the Edinburgh International Festival, who do all of that in-house. So they organise people's visas for them. And that takes a lot of time because the UK is very, very tight with its visas. It's really hard to come and visit the UK. So Fergus Linehan also says Brexit is making people cautious about investing, which means forward planning can be tricky. People don't want to invest in an economy that might be going belly up come October because who knows what the pound is going to do. And Fergus has also said this city is about finance, tourism, culture, and the universities. These are all really international industries, so you can see how it will be particularly problematic for Edinburgh.
Definitely.
Yeah. The point is, the Edinburgh Festivals were started as an opportunity for everyone to get together, share their experiences, and make some brilliant art. They're about recovering from a shared trauma and recognising our humanity. That's something we really, really need right now, and Brexit is threatening that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Very well put, Ellie.
Thank you, Claire. So, what will you be telling me about today, Claire?
Well, Ellie.
Yes.
You and I had talked about this over breakfast.
Yes.
Because
a delicious breakfast of croissant and framboise.
So
That's
good.
Raspberries.
Ugh.
That's a lie. It was raspberry jam. I'm not very good at French. Okay.
Not very good at French. The biggest lie you've ever told. And we were talking about the festivals and their role in post-war rebuilding in Europe. And you hit upon the biggest part of post-war rebuilding in Europe, which was European unification.
Yeah.
And I sort of realised how little I actually know about the European Union.
Oh my god, me too. Please teach me.
I will.
Yay.
So obviously this is deeply interesting to me in light of Brexit.
Yeah.
And realising that whilst I understand on like kind of a larger scale how the European Union works and things like that and its role in Britain, I didn't really understand how it came about because a lot of the criticism from the like Leave campaign has been that we don't get enough of a say and we didn't have enough choice and they just steal blindly from us. I was like, I don't really think that was the point of the European Union.
Unlikely.
And because this is how you and I like to understand everything, I thought I would look at it through history.
History.
So, Europe has been unified in different ways at different times throughout history, most famously by the Romans, because
they colonized everyone.
Yeah, you just can't talk about European or British history without bringing up the Romans at some point. So yeah, this is like a very Britain-light British history nugget.
That's cool. It's very important right now.
Exactly, yes. So European unification as we know it really gets underway in the 1800s. One of the first references to a United States of Europe was by Victor Hugo. Oh. Yeah, during a speech at the International Pizza
Convention?
I wish! No, just the International Peace Congress.
Boring.
Held in Paris in 1849. He said, "A day will come when all nations on our continent will form a European brotherhood. A day will come when we shall see the United States of America and the United States of Europe face to face, reaching out for each other across the seas."
Romantic.
So things really ramp up during the interwar period, when people became really conscious that national markets in Europe were interdependent with the Great Depression and everything. And people were also noticing the larger and growing US market, which fed interest in economic integration of the continent.
Okay.
So famous British economist John Maynard Keynes also got in on the action, writing in 1920 that, quote, "A free trade union should be established to impose no protectionist tariffs whatsoever against the produce of other members of the union."
Smart.
Yeah. During the same decade, Richard von Coudenhove-Kalergi...
Nice.
Nailed it. Was one of the first to imagine a modern political union in Europe and founded the Pan-Europa movement as, quote, "the only way of guarding against an eventual world hegemony by Russia."
Okay. I mean, interesting.
Yeah. He was a Freemason and he was a bit weird. So, you know, like...
I guess maybe you have to be a bit weird to think of these kooky ideas.
I mean, at the time it was sort of quite a big concept.
Yeah, totally.
But he also thought democracy would be superseded by what he called the social aristocracy of the spirit.
That's crazy.
Yep. But it was the first European, like, unification movement. And it still exists today.
Wow.
It was really important in the revolutions of 1989 that helped end the communist rule in Central and Eastern Europe.
Cool.
And they organised the Pan-European picnic at the border of communist Hungary and democratic Austria.
I read about that.
Yeah.
Oh, go Hungary.
Yeah, so, I mean, he was a bit wacky, but he started a pretty important movement that, like, is still around.
Yeah.
But back in 1929, the Prime Minister of France, Aristide Briand, gave a speech in support of a European Union before the Assembly of the League of Nations, which was the precursor to the United Nations.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, he spoke really vocally about it. But then World War II happened.
Bugger.
And everyone was a bit busy. But then after World War II, European integration was seen as an antidote to the extreme nationalism which had devastated the continent.
Yeah.
So everyone was like, well, if we were all unified politically and economically and socially, this wouldn't happen again.
Yeah.
So Winston Churchill, then Prime Minister of Britain, was all over this.
Really?
Yeah.
I wonder if Nigel Farage knows that.
Doubt it. Although, like, he was, like, really famously all over this.
Wow.
Yeah, in one of his really big speeches, Speech to the Academic Youth, held at the University of Zurich in 1946, he said, quote, "There is a remedy which would in a few years make all Europe free and happy. It is to recreate the European family, or as much of it as we can, and to provide it with a structure under which it can dwell in peace, in safety, and in freedom.
Oh.
We must build a kind of United States of Europe."
Wow. And he's a Tory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Conservative Party in Britain led the charge on being in this unified Europe.
And now they're leading the charge on noping out.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What?
Because they're idiots.
Times have changed.
I mean, you know, that's my opinion. It's also fact.
Verified.
Look, it's our podcast. I can say what I want.
Can we? Or is that libel? Oh, God.
Please don't sue me. I have no money. I spent it all on cheese. Then in 1948, after the war, the Hague Congress was held, which was a pivotal moment in this whole thing.
Woo.
Also known as the Congress of Europe, it's considered by many as the first federal moment of European history.
Ooh.
And it was held in The Hague in the Netherlands from the 7th to the 11th of May in 1948, with 750 delegates participating from around Europe, as well as observers from Canada and the United States.
Ooh.
And Churchill was the honorary president.
Ah, that's
Yeah.
cute.
So as well as politicians, there were philosophers, journalists, church leaders, lawyers, professors, entrepreneurs, and historians who
Wow.
also took an active role in the Congress.
Oh, that's so encouraging.
Right? It seems really smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get
like-
some thinkers in there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like people who aren't just thinking of the political gain of their country, but are trying to see this in like a wider context.
Totally.
Yes. And at the Congress, a call was launched for a political, economic, and monetary union of Europe. There were two schools of competing thought. Some favoured a classical international organisation with representatives of governments, so kind of like the United Nations, where a government chooses who to
A
send.
representative.
Yeah.
Okay.
And others favoured a political forum with parliamentarians.
Okay, which is what we have.
That's how the current European
Yeah.
Union model operates.
Yeah.
We got there in a very roundabout way.
Boo, boo, boo.
Yes. So at the Congress, the Spanish statesman Salvador de Madriaga,
Ah,
whose name I'm definitely mangling.
the famous surrealist painter. Yes.
Yes,
I know.
proposed the establishment of a College of Europe. So the purpose of the college was to train an elite of young executives for Europe and to promote, quote, a spirit of solidarity and mutual understanding between all the nations of Western Europe and to provide elite training to individuals who will uphold these values.
Just Western Europe.
It was because of communism.
Oh, of course, because
Yes.
Hungary and Poland, our lovely
Yes.
motherlands,
Hidden away.
behind the Iron Curtain.
So the main campus was in Bruges, in Belgium, but after...
Bruges.
Yes.
Yes.
After the Iron Curtain fell, they built a second campus in Poland as a symbol of unity.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. It still exists today. A bunch of, like, British MPs went there. Nick Clegg went there.
What?
Yep.
And it's a school.
It's a university. It's a, like,
Wow.
postgraduate studies place.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So this Congress, the Hague Congress, led to the creation of the Council of Europe on the 5th of May, 1949. So the Congress was like just a chat about like, what should we do? And they decided they wanted a union and everyone wanted to be more unified.
Cool.
And that they needed a more official way to do that because the Congress didn't really have the power to do that.
Yeah.
And so they created this Council of Europe. And the first meeting was attended by Churchill himself.
Wow, all over it, Churchill.
Yeah, he'd first publicly suggested the creation of a Council of Europe in a BBC radio broadcast on the 21st of March 1943, like during the war.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gee.
Yeah, it's really interesting. He said himself that he, quote, tried to peer through the mists of the future to the end of the war once victory had been achieved, and to think about how to rebuild and maintain peace, like, even as he was fighting the war.
God, imagine having that much energy.
Yeah, I mean, that's how he's presenting it.
Oh, okay.
But obviously he was, because there's evidence that he definitely did that. And yeah, I think he was, as they were fighting the war, he was already thinking about, like, great, once this is over, we have to stop this happening again. Yeah, which I guess is sort of how we've had this long-lasting peace since World War II, is because leaders like that thought, hey,
let's prevent this from happening.
Yeah. So the council was seen as the first great effort to really bring the nations of Europe together, and it initially included 10 countries. And both approaches that were discussed at the Hague Congress were finally kind of combined through the creation of a committee of ministers in which governments were represented, and a consultative assembly in which parliaments were represented. But no one was elected. They were still just
they were chosen.
Yeah. So it was officially founded by the Treaty of London, and it was signed in London on the 5th of May by these 10 states: Belgium, Denmark, France, Ireland, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, and the United Kingdom.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we're an OG member.
Yeah.
Cool.
Turkey and Greece joined 3 months later, and then on the 10th of August 1949, 100 members of the Council's Consultative Assembly, which were parliamentarians drawn from the 12-member nations. So they were like people who'd been elected to the parliaments of those 12-member nations were then just chosen to go and further represent their country at this assembly.
Yeah.
They met in Strasbourg, France, for its first plenary session, which was held over 18 sittings and lasted nearly a month.
Wow.
So the council was always envisaged as a forum where sovereign governments could choose to work together, but there was no supranational authority, which means that there was no one was more important than anyone else. There was no bigger authority that they were answering to. They were all working collaboratively together.
Great.
So the council focused primarily on values like human rights and democracy rather than on economic or trade issues. And they debated how to reconcile and reconstruct this, continent that, like you said, was still reeling from war. And one of the things they did for that purpose was launch the concept of a transnational court to protect the basic human rights of every European citizen, which was also championed by Churchill.
Yeah.
And in 1959, the European Court of Human Rights was established.
Cool.
Yeah. In 1955, the council also created and adopted as its official symbol the European flag with 12 golden stars arranged in a circle on a blue background.
I like that flag.
Yeah. They also created the European anthem, which is based on Beethoven's Ode to Joy.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and these were
Good
both
choice.
adopted by the European Union. So the reason I say adopted by the European Union is because the council was and is a separate organisation.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right?
Different.
Right. So this whole time it's like, yeah, great, this is going to build up and grow up and it's going to end up being called the European Union. No. It's totally separate to the Union. The Union is not controlled by it at all, but they do cooperate on a lot of things, and the Union is expected to accede to the European Convention of Human Rights, which the Council created. Yeah. So the Council comprises of a larger number of countries in the Union, and no country has ever joined the EU without first belonging to the Council of Europe.
Right, okay.
Yeah. These days its focus is still mainly on culture and stuff.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So unlike the EU, the Council of Europe cannot make binding laws, but it does have the power to enforce select international agreements reached by European states on various topics. For example, the Court of Human Rights.
So when we Brexit, which looks like it's inevitable now, will we still be part of the council?
It's a good question. I don't know.
And will we still have to abide by the human rights laws? Hopefully.
I think technically we will be, because the council is separate. So if you want to leave the council, you'd have to separately leave the council.
Yeah.
But the council is mostly, aside from being part of the Court of Human Rights, is like a cultural entity.
Okay.
And they, like I said, they can't make you do anything legally.
All right.
You just kind of get together and chat about cultural initiatives and things.
Sweet.
But then they also do have this Court of Human Rights, which European states that are part of the council have agreed to uphold.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, we should stay part of that.
That's comforting.
Yes, that's true actually. So also, unlike the EU, the Council of Europe doesn't have elected representatives. So, like I said before, governments send unelected delegates and things are done by agreement. They're not legally binding parliamentary acts. So, like, their ability to enforce things is really limited. It basically operates like the United Nations.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So the reason the Council is not the preeminent unification organisation today is because some of its leaders were frustrated by its lack of political power. Yes, and they went rogue. Yes.
Like the Fringe.
Yes, except now they are the dominant festival.
Like the Fringe.
Yes, actually, yeah. So Paul-Henri Spaak of Belgium,
Great name.
really great name, was the first president of this assembly of the Council of Europe.
Okay.
And he resigned in December 1951 in disappointment after the assembly rejected proposals for a European political authority, as he called it. And he became convinced that the Council of Europe was never going to be strong enough to achieve his long-term goal of, like, proper European unification.
Okay.
Like, political unification. And so to this end, the European Coal and Steel Community was created in 1951.
Okay.
The 6 founding countries are Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands.
Okay.
And it was formally established in 1951 by the Treaty of Paris. So the treaty created a common market for coal and steel among member states, which served to neutralize competition between European nations over natural resources.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so start small.
Yeah. The ECSC was the direct predecessor of the European Union.
All
So
right.
this offshoot is what directly evolves into the European
That
Union.
is so cool.
Yeah. European leaders Alcide de Gasperi from Italy, Jean Monnet and Robert Schuman from France, and our mate Paul-Henri,
Yeah.
understood that coal and steel were the 2 industries essential for waging war and believed that by tying their national industries together, future war between their nations would be much less likely.
That's so smart.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
Schuman straight up said that the aim was to, quote, make war not only unthinkable, but materially impossible.
Yes, that's the way to do it.
Yeah, just make it so you just can't fight them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these men, along with a few others, are officially credited as the founding fathers of the European Union.
Oh, that's lovely.
Yeah. So the ECSC was overseen by 4 institutions, a high authority composed of independent appointees, a common assembly composed of national parliamentarians, a special council composed of national ministers, and a court of justice.
Wow, that's many safeguards.
Yes, and these would ultimately form the blueprint for today's European Commission, European Parliament, and the Council of the European Union, and the European Court of Justice.
Cool.
Yeah. The UK was the first country to establish a delegation to the ECSC in 1952.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know that this means that they were a member, but they were involved.
They were interested.
Somehow they were there.
Yeah.
I don't think they weren't part of the founding of it, but they definitely got in quick.
Cool.
Yeah. So the ECSC merged and existed in different forms until 2002 when the Treaty of Paris expired.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
But in 1957, Belgium, France, Italy, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, and West Germany, which were the same 6 that created this
Original
the
steel
coal and steel
thing.
community,
Yes.
which signed the Treaty of Rome, which created the European Economic Community, the EEC.
Ah.
Yes, and it established a customs union. So a customs union is the agreement that means you don't have to pay taxes for importing and exporting goods between countries that are part of the union.
It's like a massive free trade agreement.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's exactly what it is.
Cool.
Yeah. So they basically, I think they were taking what they had kind of learnt from this coal and steel community and expanding it into something bigger. So the customs union is actually older than the European Union.
Wow.
By like a lot.
Yeah.
This is 1957. They also signed another pact creating the European Atomic Energy Community, which is called Euratom for short.
Oh, I love that.
Which was for cooperation in developing nuclear energy.
Right.
And both treaties came into force in 1958.
Cool.
So the EEC and Euratom were created separately from the ECSC, but they all shared the same courts and the Common Assembly.
Okay.
So that
they're
these-
connected.
Yeah, yeah. But during the 1960s, tensions began to show, with France seeking to limit supranational power. So France wanted to limit the power of these organizations
Okay.
because they felt like the organization was getting a bit big for its boots. But in 1965, an agreement was reached, and on the 1st of July 1967, the merger treaty created a single set of institutions from those 3 communities, which were collectively referred to as European communities.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm with you.
So Britain was the first country to sign an association agreement with the community in 1954.
Yeah.
And it applied to join in 1961. But this was vetoed by French President Charles de Gaulle.
Charles!
Yeah, he was really, really opposed to the British being part of the
Pourquoi?
group. He didn't trust them, basically.
Well, fair enough, Charles.
Yeah.
He knew something that no one else knew
Exactly.
at the time.
But eventually, de Gaulle relinquished the French presidency, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland joined the European communities on the 1st of January 1973.
Woo!
Yeah. This followed ratification of the Accession Treaty, which was signed in Brussels on the 22nd of January, my birthday, 1972, by the Conservative Prime Minister, Edward Heath.
Another Tory!
Yeah, who had pursued the UK's application to the EEC
What is happening?
since the late 1950s.
Claire!
Yeah, so he had wanted to be part of the European Economic Community since the 1950s.
So he'd been working at it for like 20 years.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's how much he believed in Europe being part of a customs union. Because he knew it was the right thing to do.
Boris.
Yes.
Not that we're political on this podcast.
We're super fucking political on this
we
podcast.
really are.
There wasn't universal agreement in Britain about joining the European community at the time. Mm-hmm. There had been opposition in the Parliament, notably from Labour's Peter Shaw.
Interesting.
Yeah, who was the shadow leader of the House of Commons at the time.
Okay.
He was critical of the community's power as an outside force to tax countries, especially since the treaty would, quote, deprive the British Parliament and people of democratic rights which they have exercised for many centuries, because it still wasn't an elected representative situation.
But it is now.
It is now. At the time, you still would, it was your elected parliament choosing delegates to send. So it wasn't direct representation.
Yeah, yeah.
And he thought it was really inappropriate for a organisation outside your country to be able to tax you if you weren't even electing representatives to it.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just so funny because half these criticisms are the things that Tories now have, and the Leave campaign now has, which is...
Co-opted.
Yeah, it's so funny that at the time, all the political allegiances were kind of flipped.
Completely different.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Interestingly, if the United Kingdom had refused to join the European communities, Denmark, Ireland and Norway wouldn't have joined either.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was even more important to the community that they agreed and that they joined. And in the end they did. All except Norway, because Norwegian voters rejected membership in a referendum.
They have a special little organisation, don't they? Or they have a special deal.
So basically they just have lots of separate deals with the European Union on lots of separate things. So they've signed certain agreements at certain times that gives them certain things, like they're part of like the customs union, but they don't have representation in European Parliament.
Right.
Which also means they're not held to certain parliamentary laws. But they do have to adhere to certain things to be part of the customs union,
so
those kind of things.
If we had actually sat down and worked out a deal...
From the get-go.
Then maybe we would have something...
Like what Norway
like
has.
That.
Yeah, which is what a lot of people from the Leave campaign, I think, were saying. They're like, oh, but we can have a deal like Norway. It's like, yes, but Norway has been negotiating this deal
for a
continuously,
long time.
since the 60s.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So they've had 60 years, pretty much. Gee. Okay.
So the idea of an elected European Parliament had been around since the beginning of the European Economic Communities, which was the Treaty of Rome in 1957.
Cool.
The Parliament itself, with its unelected officials, had been around since 1952.
Okay.
As the governing body of various European communities organisations.
Okay.
So the EEC, the Coal and Steel Community, and Euratom had all been governed by this Parliament.
Right.
But it hadn't been elected.
Right.
Yeah.
Technically. No. Okay.
It had been,
it wasn't direct representation.
Yes, that's the one. Yep. Member states just sent unelected delegates, even though Article 138 of the Treaty of Rome provided for the election of members of the European Parliament by direct universal suffrage.
Yeah, cool. All
yeah.
Right.
So when they wrote up the Treaty of Rome, they were like, we definitely want elected members to our Parliament.
Yeah, great.
Everyone gets to vote. It's direct representation. But they were just like, that's a lot of work. We'll get around to it later. Nah, we're not really that invested in that part. I'm like, you wrote the treaty, so... By the 60s, the members of the European Parliament themselves started to work towards a more open forum. But France objected to this for ages. Yeah.
Pourquoi?
Answer for yourself, France. Pourquoi, indeed. Basically, Charles de Gaulle, the then still president of France, thought it wasn't worth bothering with elections for a body that had no real budgetary or legislative powers at the time. And he believed that the Council of Ministers, which was the only authorised legislative body in the European Economic Community. So the Council of Ministers is just another group of delegates, but they're not parliaments, they're just people your government can choose to send.
Yeah,
but they don't have to be elected officials in your
Charles, you're wrong.
individual country's
wrong on that
system.
one.
Yeah, and he wanted to maintain the power with the Council of Ministers, and he was just like,
Interesting.
no. And yeah, France just kept worrying into the future, even after de Gaulle was gone, that a low electoral turnout would damage the reputation of the organisation.
Oh, I see. Which, to be fair, they're kind of right. Like, not many people voted in the European elections from the UK in the last round. And it was sort of...
Yeah, and quite a few of them, and people see that as like a criticism of the system, and it's like, well...
It's just democracy generally, right?
It's like bring in mandatory voting like we have in Australia. I don't understand how that's not a thing.
Guys.
Yeah.
We got it.
I think for us we find that hard to understand.
Yeah.
I love voting.
Me too.
Also, you vote because you have to.
And you get a sausage.
Yeah. You guys need to bring in democracy sausage, and then everyone will be voting all the time.
I'll be loving it. Also, do it on a Saturday.
Yes.
It's just so much easier.
Jeez.
Guys. All right. Done.
That's our PSA for you. But actually, during the 60s and 70s, the power of the European community and the parliament grew. And it became kind of a problem that they were doing things like taxing people and implementing environmental protection laws and stuff without direct representation.
Yeah, that's not so good.
Yeah. So after a bunch of reports and stuff, the most famous of which is the Vidal report, and after a new French president finally agrees, at summits held in Brussels on the 12th and 13th of July and 20th September in 1976, a series of decisions were taken to finalise elections by universal suffrage.
Woo!
Yeah. So the Act of 20 September, as it's called, entrusted Parliament with the task of drawing up a draft to create this electoral procedure.
Great.
But this meant that it kind of took a while because all the delegates then had to go back to their home countries with proposals and work out a system of election and then come back and it'll have to be approved. For example, in 1977, the House of Commons rejected the system of proportional representation by region that was proposed by the British government at the time.
Okay.
I don't know what it was. I don't know how it differed from what we have now, but whatever the system they had proposed then was rejected, so they had to start again and make something else. Right. So it took a while. But they finally got it sorted, and the first elections to the European Parliament by universal suffrage were held on the 7th and 10th of June 1979. Yay. And as a result, the number of members in the European Parliament increased from 198 to 410.
Whoa, that's a lot.
Yeah, because once you work out like how many people you have representing everyone, and it's not just people sending equal number of delegates because you're not representing equal numbers of people, it changes. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. At this point, though, Parliament still had no legislative power because the Council of Ministers was still the only legislative body in this European community.
Yeah.
So Parliament went like deep into the Treaty of Rome to try and wrangle more power for itself.
Right, okay.
Since they felt that as the elected body, they should have that authority.
Fair.
And in order to draw attention to this, members increased the number of written and oral parliamentary questions which they tabled to the other institutions. So they basically nagged them into getting more power.
I love that.
Yeah. And they ultimately increased its supervisory powers.
Great.
Yeah. The next big thing is the Schengen Agreement of 1985.
Yes.
It is so named for the town in Luxembourg where it is signed, and the agreement paved the way for the creation of open borders without passport controls between most member states and some non-member states.
My favourite thing.
Yeah. Originally, the Schengen treaties and the rules adopted under them operated independently from the European Union. Yeah, so there are a few reasons. It was like they were having a bit of trouble getting member states to ratify and blah, blah, blah. So they created it as like a separate agreement from the union so that they could keep the union politics out of it. However, in 1999, they were incorporated into the European Union law by the Amsterdam Treaty, while still providing opt-outs for the only two EU member states that had remained outside the area, Ireland and the UK.
The area.
The area.
Oh, yeah, we were outside of it.
Yeah. So the UK and Ireland don't operate within the Schengen area.
Yeah, because you have to get a separate visa for the UK when you enter.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
So there's different freedom of movement agreements for that.
Yes.
Yeah. So then in 1986, the Single European Act was the first major revision of the 1957 Treaty of Rome. The Act set the European community an objective of establishing a single market by the 31st of December 1992.
Cool.
And codified European political cooperation, the forerunner of the European Union's common foreign and security policy.
Okay, cool.
So the single market is the thing you've probably heard the most about during the Brexit discussion.
Yes.
Yeah. It's really ambitious. because as well as eliminating tariffs, quotas, or taxes on trades, it also includes the free movement of goods, services, capital, and people.
Like me!
Yeah, without any quotas on any of that.
Yeah.
So you don't have a limited number of people from Spain who can apply to settle in the UK. They don't have to apply.
You don't even have to apply.
Limits. Yeah.
Which is great.
Absolutely. And it also created standardized safety protocols, food safety standards, and regulates financial trades.
Sweet.
Yeah, lots of things that individual countries would have done differently are now all done the same.
Cool.
Making trade between those countries
really
much
easy.
more streamlined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can imagine.
The single market is the thing that people want to leave because they want more control back over how we do those things, though.
Right.
Yeah. So at this point, we still don't technically have a European Union.
Ah.
Yeah. We have an elected parliament, a single market, open borders, but the European Union is still called the European Committees, and this is still the collection of the EEC, Euratom, and the leftovers of the coal and steel community. Still.
Lucky! In 1992.
Yep.
Wow.
The European Union was formally established with the Maastricht Treaty on the 1st of November 1993.
That is so recent.
I know! I didn't realise that. I was really shocked because I always thought of it as being like, and
From
in the
1947
70s, we
or
joined the
something.
Union,
Yeah.
and that was the Union. And it was, but, I mean, also not entirely. So this new European Union is made up of 3 pillars. Mm-hmm. Number 1 is the European Communities, which is the traditional activities, working and decision-making procedures of the 3 original EU organisations that I mentioned before.
Yeah.
Number 2 is the Common Foreign and Security Policy, which just does what it says on the tin. Mm-hmm. And number 3 is Cooperation on Justice and Home Affairs, which, again, what it says on the tin is like intra-Europe security and policing and stuff like that.
Cool.
Yeah. And the treaty also outlined the creation of a Central European Bank and currency, which they created in 1999. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's how we get to the European Union that we know today.
That is so cool.
It is so in-depth. I was just like...
That was
It just
brilliant.
kept going further back and like so many little rabbit holes. And I was like, oh, the council. This is the history. And I was like,
Nope. I guess, of course, it's complicated because it's a super complicated thing to get that many countries to agree.
I think this is why a lot of people misunderstand it and are intimidated by it because it is really complex.
But every step of the way, everyone's been agreeing.
Yeah. And they've all wanted the same thing. They've all
Yeah.
just wanted to be unified for the sake of peace.
And prosperity.
Yeah. Which it has been. It has been the most peaceful and the most prosperous era
for
of Europe ever.
Yeah.
It's insane. Like, I don't think people understand the wealth that Europe has now that it has never had before.
Yeah.
And the peace it's had.
That's really interesting, Claire.
Yeah.
That was super enlightening and it makes me really sad.
To think that by October 31st we might not be part of that.
You know, I'm new to the UK and, you know, I think we should stay, but if people really do want to leave, it is such a shame that we're not doing that in a thoughtful, slow, sensible way because so much time and effort has gone into this incredible union.
And why not just try and fix the union to make it work in a way that feels better for us? I think people argue that, parliamentarians don't do anything. It's like, they do. They run a government.
Yeah. Elect them. Turn up to vote.
You elect them. So, find out what they're doing with
Get involved.
that job you gave them.
Yeah. Totally.
It's a difficult one. Yeah, it's simultaneously really fascinating and kind of gives you a lot of hope for seeing people come together and work really hard. And then sad to think of the way we've kind of turned our backs on that.
The way we've just stormed out.
Yeah.
In a really dramatic, thoughtless way.
Yeah. It's a shame.
If you want to hear more history tidbits, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Please, please, please rate, review, and subscribe so other history buffs can find us too.
If you want to know what sources we use, please go to our SoundCloud page. The link is in the description.
Your homework for this week is to get together with your mates and make something nice, whether that be some art or the Union of Nations.